Shen Yue, a warm-hearted man who is good at reasoning and solving difficult problems, has always been puzzled by his past memories and resume, which are like white paper. After helping his friend Jin Xin bid for the security business of Giant Industry, he was surprised to find that all the strangeness began with the strange golden building of Giant Group, and he could not only deduce the past, but also gradually, and even begin to deduce the future. Starting from deducing the future, he realized that what truly needed to be guarded against were not the formidable and unpredictable opponents that followed one after another, but the extreme future he could infer. Keywords of the novel. Extreme Alert without pop-ups. Download the complete set of Extreme Alert TXT, and read the latest chapters of Extreme Alert. Chapter 1. Wake Up at Midnight. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Wake up at midnight. When the night in the deep city transitions from the colorful noise to the dark yellow loneliness, the streets accompanied by streetlights occasionally rush past vehicles roaring and roaring, as if unwilling to accept the fall of darkness. When Shen Yue suddenly sat up from the bed, his eyelids continued to twitch slightly. He didn't look out the window at the occasional flashing car lights, but habitually glanced at the phone by the bedside. Mobile phones are like old models of elderly phones, looking extremely heavy and sturdy, out of place in this new smart world. At this moment, they are emitting piercing ringtones out of place. Shen Yue woke up not so much from a dream, but rather from the ringing of her phone. Despite letting the ringtone repeat over and over again, Shen Yue had no intention of answering because he knew it was not an incoming call ringtone, but an alarm clock. Finally, when the bell stopped ringing, he picked up his phone with a hint of confusion. His expression hesitated, but his movements were very skillful as he flipped through the alarm settings on his phone. He looked at the 2.33 alarm setting and felt a bit lost in thought. This is an extremely abnormal alarm time. Even entrepreneurs, excellent spiritual mentors, and successful individuals who enjoy boasting about their hard work, integrity, and excellence are often reminded to wake up around 4 or 5 in the morning. Getting up too early can make people suspect that the joyful multiplayer sports nightclub is not over yet. Shen Yue is not a successful cultivator and has not shown any intention of becoming a wealthy person. So what is the reason why his phone is set at this very humble, even extremely proud time? 2:33. Why did he wake himself up at this peculiar moment? Shen Yue has no answer. He has actually been waiting for the answer to this question, and since he arrived in this city, he has been waiting for all the answers. Sitting quietly, Shen Yue slowly looked around. The room was extremely rudimentary, with no signs of anyone living except for a single bed for sleeping. The whole room looked as lonely as Shen Yue. Looking at the place where he often sleeps, Shen Yue's expression was somewhat unfamiliar. When the phone alarm rang again, Shen Yue finally pressed the alarm to stop. With a gentle sigh, Shen Yue habitually got down from bed and walked towards the bathroom. The bathroom is as simple as a single man who doesn't indulge in worldly pleasures. Turning on the faucet, Shen Yue casually washed her face, closed her eyes, and took the only towel stored in this room. When she wiped her face and looked into the mirror in front of her, she suddenly froze in front of the mirror. His stiff movements were so sudden that even the late-night silence echoed with the sound of his body and bones moving together. His neck was bulging with blue blood vessels due to nervousness, and his face was condensed with an extremely frightened expression, which made his slightly emaciated and handsome face look a bit fierce. At that moment, he could hear the sound of his heart pounding loudly. He is well aware that everything is currently very abnormal, and he has been pursuing the answer. He was already prepared for the thrill. Even if a disheveled Sadako suddenly appeared in the mirror, he wouldn't be afraid to shrink back. But the scene before him was beyond his preparation, making him feel like he was in a nightmare for a moment. There is no Sadako in the mirror. There's no him in the mirror either. He only saw a mirror, reflecting the wash basin in front of him and the dismal white porcelain wall behind him, and he was not even between the mirror and the wall. The sudden change was so sudden that Shen Yue felt a blank slate in his mind, not noticing a mosquito quietly landing on his neck, piercing his sharp mouthparts into his blood vessels and greedily sucking on the intoxicating blood. After an unknown amount of time, Shen Yue finally came to his senses, and a folk legend flashed through his mind. Ghosts have no figure in the mirror. Is he a ghost? The desolate and eerie scene made Shen Yue also consider the answer. After taking a long breath, he calmed his mind slightly, closed his eyes for a moment, and looked back into the mirror. The corners of the mouth twitched slightly. There was no Sadako in the mirror, only him with a somewhat disheartened expression. Everything just now seems like an illusion. Cold sweat slowly slid down from his forehead, and Shen Yue hesitated for a moment before washing and wiping his face again. After closing his eyes and opening them, he slowly looked into the mirror. In the mirror, he looked uneasy and also hopeful. The mosquito was startled by his strange behavior and flew into the air, still lingering on the delicious food, circling around and refusing to leave. After repeating the previous action more than 10 times, Shen Yue was somewhat disappointed when he saw him in the mirror. He did not disappear again in the mirror, and he looked no different from an ordinary person. What happened just now? Is he dizzy? Illusion or illusion? He still lives in this world. Shen Yue didn't know what the answer was, but finally gave up trying. Walking back to the bed, he took a few breaths of the still scorching autumn air outside the window, leaned towards the pillow like a zombie, and closed his eyes. The darkness of the autumn night finally surged silently, and he was quickly surrounded by the darkness and merged into the darkness of his dreams. Therefore, he did not know that the mosquito that had been sucking his blood had now fallen onto the mirror. The mosquito was not satisfied with the little appetizing blood it had just consumed. After digesting for a moment, it flapped its wings and was about to fly towards the sleeping man, preparing to have a good meal. Just as he left the mirror, the mosquito suddenly froze in the air. On the long street, there are still vehicles roaring unwillingly, challenging the majestic silence of the night. The mosquito in the air trembled inexplicably in the roar of the locomotive, and then stiffened like the previous Shen Yue. In the blink of an eye, the mosquito lost its vitality and fell to the ground. However, before it could fall to the ground, its stiff body burst open, and the mist dispersed into the darkness. P.S. Important reminder, this book is an urban supernatural novel, not a supernatural novel. Smiley face. Dear readers, please bookmark this book and upload a new one. We urgently need your support. Thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Strange Big Deals. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Strange Big Deals. The piercing bell rang again. Shen Yue closed his eyes and felt the piercing sunlight outside the window. He connected his phone, but did not open his eyes. He knew who was calling. Are you awake? A very concerned voice came from the other side of the phone. Shen Yue couldn't help but sigh, feeling that this question was as boring as asking, "Have you eaten?" every day. How can I answer your phone if I'm not awake? Are you sleepwalking? On the other side of the phone, Shen Yue didn't mind the mockery in his tone, and said warmly, "That's good. I've been up for a long time. I'm driving and I'll be downstairs soon. You come downstairs and wait for me." When Shen Yue felt that the conversation had ended, he added on the phone, "This is definitely a big deal." Shen went downstairs about 5 minutes later. He lived in a single apartment on the roadside, and the transportation was very convenient. Not far from downstairs was the main transportation road. During the morning rush hour, pedestrians often carry breakfast and hurriedly repeat the fixed trajectory of life. Shen Yue walked slowly towards a breakfast shop next to the apartment with a step that was out of place. Based on his experience, what Jin Xin said will arrive soon, basically half an hour later. At this time, he can definitely have a leisurely breakfast and even join the ranks of square dancing aunties. But before he arrived at the breakfast shop, there was a proud honk on the roadside behind him. Shen Yue was not prepared to turn around because he could tell that it was definitely not the car driven by Jin Xin. Jin Xin drives a famous car. A very famous car, the Wuling Hongguang. In today's era, famous people may not necessarily belong to aristocratic families anymore, and famous cars may also be very cheap. The sound of cheap car horns is like that of cheap wandering singers, with a hoarse and unwilling voice in the desolate voice. Unexpectedly, the proud sound of the horn was as fanatical as a poodle barking at strangers. Shen Yue frowned and turned around to see which nouveau riche was so annoying, when he saw Jin Xian's big face like a xiaobing, baked cake and griddle. Get on the car quickly. Jin Xian's face was flooded with oil. Seeing the sound of the horn calling out, Jin Xian had already leaned half of his body out of the car, waving his arm to greet Shen Yue, as if showing off the Rolex gold watch on his wrist. I'll buy you breakfast. Shen Yue got on the bus unexpectedly and took the breakfast handed by Jin Xian. He couldn't help but ask, did you win the lottery? He was actually sitting in a Mercedes-Benz car. Jin Xian knew what happened to Shen Yue and explained, don't you know there was a car rental service in this era? This car rental company is trying to seize the market by offering big discounts and rewards. As a new customer, we have a big gift package, and with some connections, renting this car for less than 500 yuan a day. As soon as he stepped on the accelerator, Jin Xian excitedly said, this deal is done. We will definitely have the latest version of the Big Ben for the rest of our lives. Shen Yue looked out of the window silently, without asking much. He knew that with Jin Xian's temper, he would have to say endless things. Upon hearing the door-to-door transaction, he was not as excited as Jin Xian, and even had no hint of excitement. In fact, if it weren't for Jin Xian, he wouldn't be interested in doing any business either. But he knew that it was the main customer who could make Jin Xian rent a car so grandly and rush to the appointment so urgently. Jin Xian looked at Shen Yue in the rearview mirror and said with some concern, it seems like you haven't slept well again. Then he added, are you still waiting? How can a person who wakes up once a night sleep well? Look at me, as soon as I touch the pillow, I sleep until dawn like a dead pig. Shen Yue glanced at Jin Xian's lower eyelids and asked, did you sleep well last night? Jin Xian's eye bags were slightly swollen. From Shen Yue's perspective, this was a sign of staying up late. Last night was an exception, wasn't it busy with business? Jin Xian said awkwardly. Shen Yue wanted to say something, but ultimately did not say it. Seeing that Shen Yue did not respond, Jin Xian returned to the topic of concern and said, you are such a smart person. Have you ever thought that the 2.33 alarm on your phone might have been unintentionally set by some mischievous child? What kind of business is it? Shen Yue changed the topic. Jin Xian knew that Shen Yue didn't want to talk about the topic of alarm clocks and said with a knowing tone, do you know Giant Industry? Shen Yue nodded slightly, then became somewhat skeptical and said, are you saying that Giant Industries is hiring us for security? He finally understood why Jin Xian wanted to rent a car. People rely on clothing, Buddha relies on gold, and negotiating with Giant Industries to buy and sell a Wuling Hongguang is clearly not qualified. Even if Jin Xian drives a Mercedes, it should not be Jin Xian's turn to handle the security matters of Giant Industry. As far as Shen Yue knows, there are only two people in Jin Xian's security company. The legal representative Jin Xian. Shen Yue is Jin Xian's special consultant, and the two of them work to effectively communicate the needs of buyers and sellers, while ensuring the safety of customers and maximizing the interests of multiple parties. To put it simply, Jin Xian's security company is just a leather bag company, earning a price difference by piecing together a piece of paper. The bidding process for companies like Giant Industry is actually as strict as recruiting for multinational corporations, and it must be based on qualifications. How could Jin Xin's leather bag company fall under the eye of Giant Industry? Don't believe it, right? Actually, I don't believe it either. Jin Xian swallowed his saliva, it's just an opportunity at the moment. Giant Industry is currently widely posting hero posts, inviting heroes from all over the world to gather in Huashan to discuss swordsmanship. Speak in person, Shen Yue interrupted. Jin Xin smiled and said, "It's not just about catching ghosts and creating an atmosphere right now. What are you doing so seriously?" After pausing for a moment, Jin Xin explained the reason. Giant Industry suddenly sent an invitation to all the security companies in this city, asking those who are interested in doing their security business to submit their company resumes to Giant Building today. They will find suitable candidates to take on security matters. I didn't believe this good news either, but let's. At this point, Jin Xin said with some confidence, "After all, we have some connections. It's true that we know this. What do you want to protect? People or goods? Building intelligent bidding. Meeting venue monitoring security. Or?" Shen Yue pondered, knowing that most companies nowadays cooperate across industries, and Giant Industries' capital is spread all over the world, with numerous industries involved and countless places where security is needed. "I don't know," Jin Xin said very decisively. "Giant Industry has blocked all information. But I know this is definitely an opportunity." Glancing at Shen Yue's furrowed brow, Jin Xin understood his thoughts and explained, "Shen Yue, I know you think I'm beyond my control. With the scale of Giant Industry, even if we give this order to us, we may not be able to swallow it. But many things are man-made, and you must have heard that Giant Industries' unconventional bidding is very strange. If it comes to security, we can't even rank high in the city, but if it comes to exposing people who pretend to be mischievous and dealing with so-called unclean things, aren't we both very good at it?" After speaking, he grinned. Shen Yue smiled and agreed with Jin Xin's judgment. The bidding process of Giant Industry this time was quite suspicious. But the two of them are indeed very skilled in handling the business of pretending to be mischievous. Jin Xin also smiled and said, "Besides, I can't do it. Isn't there still you? Now is our chance to turn things around, and it's also an opportunity to help you regain your identity. What do you think?" Jin Xin instinctively looked around and lowered his voice, saying, "We've put in a lot of effort, but we haven't figured out who you used to be. When we go to Giant Industry, the people there have a lot of knowledge. Maybe there will be someone who knows you." Shen Yue fell silent, feeling that what Jin Xin said made sense. "You still can't remember everything from before?" Jin Xin asked with concern. "I don't completely forget, I remember the salary for this month hasn't been paid yet," Shen Yue thought for a moment and said. Jin Xin chuckled and said, "Look at what you're saying, I'm afraid I'll be like an unscrupulous capitalist, defaulting on employee wages and running away. Don't worry, this deal is done, and our company is expected to go public soon. Would you be able to hold half of the shares?" As he spoke, he turned the car into the bustling giant square ahead. At the end of the square, a building rises like a pagoda, as if to poke a hole in the blue sky. The surrounding buildings of the pagoda-shaped building, whether commercial or residential, cannot be compared in height. The exterior walls of pagoda-like buildings are not common colors, but are decorated with golden materials from top to bottom. Under the blue sky, the golden exterior walls reflect sunlight, like immortal buildings, appearing particularly dazzling. Shen Yue looked at the golden building ahead and was lost in thought for a moment before whispering, "Royal luxury, avoiding ghosts." The layout of this building is a bit interesting. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. True Love. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 True Love. Jin Xin slammed the brakes and avoided a man in front who was looking down at his phone, honking his horn to show dissatisfaction. Seeing the man leave without feeling like a lonely ghost, Jin Xin said helplessly, "Look, this guy is as focused as an ancient person holding an ancestral tablet on his phone. It doesn't matter if he dies, he has harmed those of us who don't want to die." Seeing Shen Yue still looking at the golden building ahead, he found a parking spot and carefully parked the car. Finally, Jin Xin said, "Do you also know the saying, royal luxury, avoiding ghosts?" Shen Yue nodded. Jin Xin couldn't help but say, "Do you know that this used to be a place for shooting live targets?" Shen Yue was too lazy to nod again, but understood that what Jin Xin meant by a place to shoot live targets was the execution ground. Jin Xin spoke endlessly. Decades ago, due to the large number of deaths here, there were often many evil things happening, which led to no one daring to live here. When Li Giant from Giant Industry bought land and built buildings here, many people said that he would be disturbed by the lonely ghosts here, and maybe his family would be destroyed. With a sigh, Jin Xin sighed and said, "But fate is really hard to say. I didn't expect someone to hire a very famous feng shui architect, who built a feng shui pattern of royal luxury and avoidance of ghosts. I heard that this building and the surrounding planned commercial district layout correspond to the distribution of purple walls in the sky, which is how ancient palaces were built. This pattern symbolizes the unity of heaven and man, and can bring pure yang energy to the sky. Li Giant found someone to build this building, indicating that it is a place that inherits heaven and naturally can hold a group of unclean things that gather yin energy. As a result, Li Giant, because of this unique golden building, not only does it not have a pure yang energy. Breaking the family, now I am truly as wealthy as the emperor. You shouldn't be a security guard, you should be a feng shui master, Shen Yue replied. Jin Xin laughed and said, although I'm not superstitious about this, there are too many people in this world who are superstitious about it. Look at the companies in this city, how many do they not supply guangong? They don't believe anyone openly or secretly. Which store doesn't cut the ribbon when it opens and doesn't invite the god of wealth to win a lottery? Posting a spring festival couplet for good luck is not superstitious. Setting up a firefight to ward off evil is not superstitious. Some of the current security industry are actually closely related to the feng shui industry in the past. Why don't you just take the elevator to the underground parking lot without stopping? Shen Yue interrupted Jin Xin's lengthy speech. What are you doing going up from underground? The underground parking lot has so much yin qi, it's very harmful to your body. Jin Xin shook his head and said, as someone with such status, we must enter through the main entrance openly. That's right, the car you rented for a lot of money must show off in broad daylight, otherwise it will be like a night trip in a brocade robe and not show any signs of success. Shen Yue pointed directly to the key issue and took a piece of paper handed over by Jin Xin before getting off the car. The aroma rushed in, and two women who had been marinated with cosmetics passed by gracefully. They couldn't help but glance at Jin Xin, who was somewhat burly and robust, getting off the Mercedes-Benz. Jin Xin immediately tidied up his shiny hair, propped his elbows on the body of the car, and looked at the two beautiful women with fiery eyes. He said roughly, "Beautiful woman, are you interested?" The two women's faces changed instantly, and one of them cursed, crazy, and hastily left, pulling his hesitant companion. Jin Xin looked at Shen Yue and took the lead, saying, "You must look like a fishing law enforcement officer, not that I'm not attractive enough." Shen Yue shook his head and said, "Information. Didn't I give you your information?" Jin Xin puzzled. Watching Shen Yue's somewhat helpless expression, Jin Xin finally regained consciousness and took out the prepared bidding documents from the car. "I haven't received my information yet," Jin Xin later defended, "don't blame me for being ignorant. It's because time is too tight. I was busy renting a car and preparing documents last night, but I didn't have enough manpower. I actually want to find another woman to make up for it." "What are you doing?" Shen Yue asked casually. "As someone with such status, it's too cheap to bid with our own documents. We have to find a vice secretary. Sometimes, the score needs to be displayed," Jin Xin defended. "It's because there's a novice there who seems to lower the team's experience value, but in reality, it will also lower the opponent's defense against us, which is more conducive to our surprise victory. That's why you're looking for a new female secretary." Shen Yue walked and said, "It seems that you really value this job application." Seeing Shen Yue walking towards the giant building, Jin Xin exclaimed, "Don't worry, you still need to change clothes. Look at you, your attire is too casual." Let's go to a nearby brand store to buy a brand name for you to tidy up, and don't let those who are narrow-minded underestimate you. He didn't wait to finish speaking when he saw Shen Yue suddenly stop and couldn't help but approach. There was a mirror not far from where Shen Yue passed by, reflecting Shen Yue's somewhat ugly face. While in the car, listening to Jin Xin's nagging, Shen Yue kept an eye on himself in the rearview mirror. He never disappeared in the mirror. So what happened last night? With confusion, he saw the mirror not far away and instinctively glanced at it again, only to find himself disappearing into the mirror again, causing his heart to tremble. He had anticipated this scene to happen, but at the moment when it really happened, he couldn't help but be shocked. It's not an illusion, he really didn't see his figure in the mirror. What's wrong? Did you hit a ghost? Jin Xin patted Shen Yue's shoulder and found that she was a bit serious. He couldn't help but become more serious. At this time, it's 9 o'clock. According to the theory of yin and yang, it's the time when the yang energy is surging, and ghosts shouldn't appear at this time. Shen Yue frowned and said, "At least we are a high-tech company. Can you stop talking about ghosts all day?" "Sure. So your DNA mutated. Which nerve is abnormal? Are you under too much pressure and hallucinating? Is this scientific enough?" Jin Xin immediately changed his statement. "Can you see me in the mirror just now?" Shen Yue noticed her figure reappearing in the mirror and rubbed her eyes, asking. Jin Xin rested his hand on Shen Yue's shoulder and looked in the mirror side by side for a while before finally saying, "I see." "What's wrong? You're still so graceful and charming, just slightly shorter than me. It's a bit regrettable." Although his face was not as white as Shen Yue, his eyes were not as big as Shen Yue, and his nose was not as straight as Shen Yue, he was half a head taller than Shen Yue, which has always been something that Jin Xin takes pride in. With a sense of relief, Jin Xin said again, "This is Jin Wuzhu, no one is perfect." "What's wrong? Don't always frown like you're crying. We're going to talk about business, not a memorial service. Can we just have a good laugh?" During his speech, Jin Xin flipped over Shen Yue's shoulder and earnestly persuaded him. Suddenly hearing someone chuckling, Jin Xin turned his head and saw some passers-by looking towards him. A couple of lovers were also pointing not far away, and the man even took out his phone to take a photo on this side. What to take a photo of? Jin Xin finally let go of his hand and pointed at the man, shouting, "I'm most annoyed with people like you who have to take a photo and upload it online even if you fart. You've infringed on my portrait rights, believe it or not, I'll smash your phone." The man looked at Jin Xin and found it a bit difficult to get along with. Finally, when he put down his phone and left with his couple, he couldn't help but mutter, in broad daylight, "If you dare to show off, wouldn't you dare to have someone take photos? What are we showing off?" Jin Xin waved his fist in confusion, turned his head to look, and suddenly froze. "Wang Ju really loves you. Shen Yue, why are you standing here in a daze?" He finally understood why passers-by were paying so much attention to them. It turned out that in front of them was a wedding screening studio called Wang Ju's True Love, and the two big men were posing in a Qiangyao drama in front of a mirror standing in front of the studio, which was understandable to others. "It's not like this place, how could there be a mirror on the roadside?" Shen Yue looked at Jin Xin in surprise and said lightly, "Don't be like a ghost. We're going to talk business, not a memorial service. Let's have a good laugh." Jin Xin couldn't help but laugh and cry. He punched him and said, "You kid, just embarrass me if you find a chance." Before they finished speaking, a voice beside them sounded, "Don't you want to go to the store to have a look? Qi is coming. Recently, there is a big discount for guests, and wedding photos are 50% off." Shen Yue and Jin Xin turned their heads and saw a bright light in front of them. Under the sunshine, a young girl was smiling as she looked at the two of them. The girl's dress is simple, with a white short-sleeved tee-shirt paired with denim pants. She has bright eyes, a delicate and fair face, and a string of broken jade necklaces under her neck. Coupled with her curvaceous figure, she exudes youthful energy. The somewhat dazzling autumn sun shone on the young girl, becoming somewhat gentle. The girl's gaze wandered back and forth between the stunned two of them, finally falling on Jin Xin. Life has been fleeting, and since it is true love, even if it cannot be promised to true love in this life, it is still good to leave the most beautiful time in true love. Sir, do you think so? End of this chapter. 4. Chapter 4 Strange Combination. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Strange Combination. Seeing the serious appearance of the young girl, Jin Xin really wants to ask you, this aunt, how many degrees of myopia do you have? Can you tell that Shen Yue and I are truly in love? Little girl, you got it wrong. You wouldn't think we were that one, would you? Jin Xin felt that food could be eaten randomly, but there were some things he couldn't say randomly. However, he forgot that when he was with Shen Yue, he always liked to talk nonsense seriously. It doesn't matter which era it is, there's no need to cover it up anymore. The girl smiled with a understanding smile and said, some regions in our country have legislation to ensure the happiness of true love. Which region of our country is so open? The girl spoke vaguely, but Jin Xin understood immediately and couldn't help but ask. Are you still saying it's not that? The girl saw Jin Xin's anxious expression and said clearly, it's the province of Bay Island. Jin Xin understood and shook his head, saying, we're just looking in the mirror. Where did you go? As he prepared to solemnly defend himself as a normal man, Shen Yue spoke on the side, did you come from business or legislation? Jin Xin finally realized that he had a big business to do and quickly said, it's not all because you inexplicably have to look in the mirror, so naturally I'm here too. Looking at the expression on the girl's face that said, true love should be so considerate and companionship, Jin Xin wished he could poke two big holes in his originally beautiful bright eyes, feeling darker and darker. Jin Xin pulled Shen Yue to leave, and the girl didn't give up and said, sir, you can think about it first. I have contact information here, you have considered it. Jin Xin suddenly stopped and turned around. The girl immediately said, sir, have you considered it? Jin Xin looked up and down at the girl and suddenly said, little girl, how much does it cost you to work in this studio for a day? The girl hesitated for a moment and said, well, sometimes business is good, and there are commissions of thousands or even tens of thousands in a day. Sir, what are you doing with this? Do you still work part-time to rob banks in this movie studio? Jin Xin didn't believe the girl's quote at all. He haggled and said, 800. Follow us for half a day. He then looked at the gold watch on his wrist and said, how about I give you 800 yuan at 9 o'clock in the evening? 9:30, 12 hours. The girl looked surprised and instinctively took 2 steps back. Sir, I'm a serious person, she said. Jin Xin laughed heartily and said, where did you think? Our company is going to bid for giant industry today, and we need to wait for 3 talents from the bidding company. My full-time secretary didn't feel well today, and the second secretary happened to be on the way. And there was traffic jam again. Shen Yue looked up at the floating clouds in the sky and seemed to feel that Jin Xin's third and fourth secretaries were rushing to the scene. He knows Jin Xin's work style, and their entire company's assets, except for the Rolex on Jin Xin's wrist, are probably all blown out by Jin Xin's mouth. Jin Xin looked angry and said, the traffic conditions in this city are really bad now, always delaying people from doing big business. It seems that we need to buy a private plane in the future. After looking at the time, he actually lit up the Rolex gold watch on his wrist and said, do you think someone like me with status and style might not be serious? Maybe I'm not doing serious business. You may, the girl nodded earnestly. Jin Xin immediately patted Shen Yue's shoulder and said, look at how serious she is when she praises you. Shen Yue knew that even Zhang Sanfeng couldn't match Jin Xin's push to resolve the embarrassment, and finally said, "We're going to meet the person in charge of giant industry. After meeting the person in charge, you can leave." "Is that all?" The girl looked more trusting of Shen Yue, but still hesitated. Will there be such a good thing? The newly opened Hippo supermarket still has to scan the QR code to give 8 free eggs. Jin Xin pulled Shen Yue and turned around before leaving. "If you don't want to, forget it." The girl quickly exclaimed, "Wait a minute, I didn't say I didn't want to." Xiao Kuai walked up and the girl quickly entered the role, saying, "This leader, what is your surname?" "My surname is Jin Xin." Jin Xin took out a gilded business card and handed it to the girl. "Don't call me the leader, it's too old-fashioned." "How do you call yourself?" The girl hesitated. Jin Xin asked in response, "Are you a secretary? Or am I a secretary?" Secretaries solve problems, not to ask questions. The girl immediately said, "Is it okay to call you Grandpa?" Jin Xin was startled and somewhat skeptical. "We are a legitimate company, and you came from a legitimate university, right?" The girl chuckled and said, "I'm teasing you. Shouldn't I just call you Mr. Jin?" Jin Xin's face turned slightly bitter and he glanced at Shen Yue. Shen Yue thought to himself, "You two are quite a good match, both of you are very funny. If you pull someone else, you can fight against the landlord." The girl said again, "Mr. Jin, your family is very short of money, isn't it? Why did we give you such a name?" A bunch of gold crowded together. Seeing Jin Xin's unhappy face, the girl laughed and said, "I'm still joking with you. From the name, Mr. Jin, your family must have a lot of money." Jin Xin suddenly became happy. "When we arrive at giant industry, we need to be so talkative." He casually asked, "My secretary, what's your surname?" Shen Yue couldn't help but distance himself a bit from these two, feeling that passers-by hearing the conversation between the CEO and the secretary mostly thought it was a neural company. "My surname is Hai and my name is Hai Mingzhu. I just graduated from college," the girl introduced herself. Jin Xin looked at Hai Mingzhu a few more times and said, "You shouldn't call that name." "Ah. So, Mr. Jin, what do you think my name should be?" Hai Mingzhu seemed to have fully integrated into her role. "Even if it's farting, you have to act very rewarding as the CEO. There are so many pearls in the sea, how can you stand out?" Jin Xin said thoughtfully, "You should call yourself Hai Jin Jin. There's a saying that goes, it's gold that always shines. It's what makes you stand out in the sea." After saying that, he burst out laughing proudly. Hai Mingzhu looked at Jin Xin and seemed to feel that he should add some brainpower. She turned to Shen Yue and said, "Where's this CEO? What's your surname?" "Shen Yue." Shen Yue said simply and clearly. "Our company's general consultant." "Just call Shen Consultant," Jin Xin introduced. "Do you have any contact information? A business card or something?" Hai Mingzhu said casually. Jin Xin suddenly had a suspicion. Wouldn't this woman agree to follow because she was interested in Shen Yue? Then he shook his head, feeling that this speculation was very unreliable. Although Shen Yue was not bad-looking, he was as inexplicable as the same wood, and only when a woman was blind would she take a liking to him. But it seems that this Heimingzhu is really a bit blind. It feels like he and Shen Yue are a pair. Jin Xin shook his head and realized that time was a bit tight. He didn't have time to choose a secretary or buy clothes for Shen Yue. He handed the bidding document to Hai Mingzhu and took the lead in walking towards the giant building. The trading district in front of the giant building is bustling with people coming and going just after 9 o'clock. However, the front door of the main building of the giant building is slightly deserted, with 2 security guards standing solemnly at the entrance, carefully observing the incoming personnel. As Heimingzhu approached the building, he hesitated and said, "Mr. Jin, Giant Industry has very strict security measures. It's impossible for idle people to enter during normal hours. Do you have an appointment? What's the appointment for? Jin Xin clearly saw the big scene before. Just follow me. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Has a great beginning. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 6. Gives you two paths. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 6. Two paths for you. The receptionist in the elevator room saw the elevator go up and a surprised expression flashed on her face. She immediately apologized and said, "Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were authorized. The people holding this black card are all legitimate members of Giant Industry and are also highly trusted by Li Giant." Miss Ingbin understands this very well. She still maintains a cautious attitude when dealing with this situation. Jin Xin smiled magnanimously and said, "It's not a problem. All of this is caused by Lao Wang, and if we have to blame him, we can only blame Lao Wang." Miss Ingbin didn't answer the conversation, so she obviously wouldn't casually evaluate high-level leaders. There is only one Lao Wang on the 66th floor. Lao Wang can make many mistakes without anyone blaming her. If she says one wrong word, she may be kicked out of Giant Industry. He Mingzu's eyes widened, obviously unable to understand what was going on now. From taking them into the building to the 66th floor of the giant building, Jin Xin seemed casual, but Hai Mingzhu knew very well that they had gone through at least 3 levels, and when they passed them, Jin Xin used 3 completely different methods. Is this way of negotiating business? After watching Jin Xin and the other 3 leave the elevator, the welcoming lady immediately connected to the speaker and said, "Security manager, there are 3 people who have not received instructions from the upper level but have arrived on the 66th floor with a license. They are now heading towards Director Wang's room." Standing by the elevator, seeing Jin Xin looking back, the welcoming lady squeezed out a smiling face and bowed in a distance to show respect. Jin Xin waved his hand to release his goodwill, but spoke as if he was in a combat state. "Shen Yue, guess what she will do next?" When Hai Mingzhu was unclear about what he was saying, Shen Yue had already said, "From the current situation, Miss Ingbin is very cautious. Although she has let you up, she obviously suspects your identity. To be cautious, she will notify the security personnel here to be in charge, and the security personnel will not arrive immediately. However, if you fail to negotiate with Director Wang, the security personnel may soon come behind us. You don't have much time to discuss business." Shen Yue was not surprised by Jin Xin's methods. He knew that using the normal procedure to make an appointment with the old Wang mentioned by Jin Xin would take at least a year. At that time, even the yellow cauliflower would be cold, let alone discussing business. Wait. Is the franchise card fake? Hai Mingzhu understood a little. However, she clearly couldn't understand how, with the strength of Giant Industries, there could be counterfeit franchise cards. Jin Xin smiled and arrived at the door of an office, politely knocking on the door first. After a moment, a woman with a decent demeanor walked out and, looking at her exquisite attire, it was obvious that she was a secretary. She frowned and looked at several people. "Who are you? What are you doing here without an appointment?" Jin Xin looked at the woman and said, "Secretary Zhou, don't you remember me?" As the woman recalled, Jin Xin had already pushed the door open and passed by the secretary's front room, directly opening the door to the room inside. A person inside suddenly looked up, as if startled, but then put on a majestic gesture and waved his hand to ask Secretary Zhou, who was following in, to temporarily leave. He shouted to Jin Xin, "Who are you?" That person looked quite old, with a Mediterranean head that could only shine with the cold light from a pair of narrow eyes. Upon seeing the person, Shen Yue's mind immediately flashed with some information about the paper that Jin Xin had given him. Wang Xinghai, the director of the supervisory board of Giant Industry, was actually a retainer of the Li family. Wang Xinghai served at the Li family before the birth of Li Jie, the eldest son of Li Giant, and has been with Li Jie ever since. Giant Industries is a multinational enterprise, but it adopts a family management approach. After Li Giant established a huge commercial kingdom, he retired from the background. As the eldest son of the Li family, Li Jie, who was once known as the Crown Prince of the East Palace, is naturally the heir of the kingdom. Currently, he is the chairman and CEO of Giant Industry. And Wang Xinghai has always followed Li Jie's side, and can definitely be said to be the real power figure of Giant Industry. Director Wang, don't you recognize me? Jin Xin opened his arms boldly, as if he wanted to give Wang Xinghai a warm hug. After all, in his words, Director Wang is the same person wearing the same pants as him. However, Director Wang appeared to be the kind of person who wouldn't admit his pants when he picked them up. Faced with Jin Xin's enthusiasm, there was no emotional fluctuation, let alone any intention of welcoming him. He spoke again, "How did you come in?" "Of course it came in." Jin Xin finally withdrew his arm and knew that time was running out. "Director Wang, since you don't know me, let me introduce myself first." Despite Hai Mingzhu's chin almost hitting her feet, Jin Xin quickly said, "I am the general manager of Jintang Security Company in this city, Jin Xin." Pointing to Shen Yue, "This is a specially hired consultant from Jintang Company, Shen Yue." After a pause, he pointed to Hai Mingzhu and said, "This is the general manager of our company's business in the Southeast Asian region, Hai Mingzhu." Hai Mingzhu didn't expect her promotion to be like riding a rocket, feeling that happiness came too suddenly and looking almost dizzy. Jin Xin continued, "I know that your company is now inviting local security companies to bid, so I came to bid without invitation. This is the bid from Jintang Company." As soon as he uttered the word bid, Hai Mingzhu cleverly handed over the bid. Jin Xin nodded in satisfaction and gently placed the bidding document on the table. Director Wang didn't even look at the bidding documents, he just looked at Jin Xin with suspicion. He has been working at Giant Industries for many years, and his eyesight is naturally experienced. Although Giant Industry is not a palace, there are very few people who can come to him without reservation in recent years, except for giants like Li Giant and Li Jie. Wang Xinghai sat in his seat and calmly pressed the red emergency button on the side of the table. With a smile on his face, he said, "This bidding matter is under the responsibility of my subordinate manager Liao. You just follow the normal procedures and don't need to submit the bid here." Jin Xin also laughed and said, "Director Wang, I feel like something big is happening at Giant Industry." He noticed that Wang Xinghai's eyelids twitched unintentionally, confirming his judgment in his heart, and immediately said, "Manager Liao didn't consider this to be an important matter." Originally, submitting bids was a normal procedure, but Manager Liao seems to be not following the normal procedure. "I'm afraid it will delay the business of Giant Industry." Jin Xin's words are vague, but Wang Xinghai, an old fox, can easily tell that Manager Liao is likely to receive some red envelopes from bidding companies. However, Manager Liao is the cousin of Director Wang, so he naturally doesn't mind receiving some benefits. Well, if Giant Industry has employees who do not follow the rules, you can file a complaint with the relevant departments of our company. We will handle it fairly. Wang Xinghai's evasive approach is definitely not inferior. Jin Xin frowned and thought to himself, "You old fox looks like Bao Qing Tian, but who didn't know that the final result of the complaint would be summarized to you. I complain to a fool his mother, fool. Isn't that foolish enough?" Feeling like time was running out, Wang Xinghai carefully picked up the bidding documents on the table with 2 fingers and threw them to Jin Xin like a bug. Jin Xin remained motionless and allowed the bidding documents to fall to the ground. Hai Mingzhu was dumbfounded and hurriedly bent down to pick up the bidding documents, feeling lost for a moment. Glancing at the security personnel outside the door, Wang Xinghai felt confident and said with a smile on his face, "Mr. Jin. Is that right? Giant Industries does legitimate business and does not welcome petty theft. If you really want to bid, please follow the proper procedures. If you break in here without permission, I can find someone to catch you. After a moment's pause, Wang Xinghai felt that he was no longer in danger. He said with dignity, "You have two options now. One is to be escorted to the station by the security guard, and the other is to obediently follow the security guard out of this giant building. What are you going to choose?" The security personnel have stood behind the three of Jin Xin. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. I am also very helpless. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. I am also very helpless. Although he felt that Jin Xin and his team had some connections, Wang Xinghai didn't have much patience to communicate with them. Seeing the security personnel in place, Wang Xinghai immediately showed the demeanor of a big shot wielding the power of life and death. Jin Xin suddenly smiled. Wang Xinghai felt strange in his heart and frowned. "What are you laughing at?" Even though he was knowledgeable, he couldn't think of any reason why Jin Xin was happy. Jin Xin clapped his palms and looked at Shen Yue, saying, "What I can do has come to a temporary end. It's up to you now." Shen Yue shook his head helplessly and took a step forward. "What are you doing? Don't mess around. Believe it or not, I can lock you all up in the station." Wang Xinghai felt a little flustered as these people were about to get rough. The security personnel on the side quickly stepped forward and held down Shen Yue's arm. Shen Yue didn't struggle and looked at Wang Xinghai and said, "Director Wang, I want to talk to you privately for a few minutes. Can you please ask these security guards to go out for a while?" "Who do you think you are, kid?" Before Wang Xinghai could speak, a sturdy security guard had already shouted and was about to turn Shen Yue away. "Tiffany," Shen Yue suddenly said. Everyone was taken aback, most of whom didn't understand what Shen Yue was saying. But these three words seemed to have extraordinary magic, which stunned Wang Xinghai for a moment. He opened his mouth as if he was about to say something, and suddenly said to the security personnel, "You go out first, close the door." The leading security guard hesitated and said, "Director Wang." He looked at Shen Yue and others with some concern, obviously considering the safety of Director Wang. "Get out," Wang Xinghai said impatiently. After the security personnel withdrew, Wang Xinghai sat back in the office chair and curled up slightly, like a hedgehog in danger. He looked at Shen Yue with suspicion and said, "What are you saying?" Hai Mingzhu propped up her ears and couldn't understand how Shen Yue could easily resolve the tense situation with just one sentence. She really wanted to hear what Shen Yue was going to say. Jin Xin sat down leisurely and looked at Shen Yue with a smile on his face. Shen Yue glanced around. Finally, she said, "Tiffany used to be a diamond ring brand, but it has been several years since she turned to perfume." Hai Mingzhu looked confused. Wang Xinghai frowned and said, "Are you actually working in security or brand agency? Do you want to recommend diamond rings to me? Are you going to the wrong place?" Shen Yue smiled a rare smile. "Director Wang doesn't need Tiffany perfume, does he? If you like to talk nonsense, please go outside the giant building and say it." Wang Xinghai impatiently stood up again, looking ready to find security guards to come in. "Director Wang doesn't use Tiffany perfume, but the room has the smell of Tiffany limited edition perfume." Shen Yue wrote lightly. Wang Xinghai frowned and said, "What do you want to say?" As if thinking of something, Wang Xinghai immediately said, "My secretary uses perfume. Why is it surprising that my room smells of perfume? But I don't know what brand of perfume she uses." Shen Yue looks at Wang Xinghai with an ambiguous look. "I heard that Tiffany perfume is not cheap. Some perfume are not much less expensive than diamond rings. Your company is really rich and powerful." Director Wang's secretary also uses Tiffany perfume in limited edition, which makes people feel ashamed. It depends on the place. Different places may lead to different fates for the same person. Jin Xin suddenly took the conversation and said, "Have you never heard of Li Si's mouse theory?" "What mouse theory?" Shen Yue asked in reverse. He naturally knew what Jin Xin was going to say, but if he didn't take it this way, Jin Xin wouldn't be able to continue. The two of them are like singing a double reed, everything they say is for the audience to listen to, and this audience is naturally Wang Xinghai. Li Si was the prime minister of the ancient Qin dynasty. Jin Xin crossed his legs and said, he used to be a poor scholar. One day, he saw the mice in the toilet shouting at everyone, but the mice in the granary of the national treasury were tall and ate fat without anyone asking. Therefore, he sighed and said, being a person should be like a mouse, and being a mouse should also be like being a mouse in the granary of the national treasury. That's why he worked hard to become the prime minister of Qin. But it seems that Li Si's fate is not good, Shen Yue murmured. Yeah, I was beheaded. Jin Xin smiled. With a loud bang, Wang Xinghai angrily patted the table and stood up, saying, enough. Are you messing around endlessly? But he didn't greet the security guard and sneered at Shen Yue, if you think there's something wrong with my secretary, go check my secretary. If you think there's something wrong with my accounts, go to the tax department. If you have the ability to be cynical, just use your skills. My position has been achieved through my hard work. Do you think I can handle such insinuating accusations? Shen Yue was surprised and said, Director Wang is serious. Where can we manage the tax affairs? I just want to say that Director Wang doesn't know Tiffany perfume, doesn't he know Tiffany diamond ring? I don't believe you if you don't know. There is one in your drawer. Wang Xinghai was taken aback and instinctively looked at the drawer. The drawer was not tightly closed, revealing a corner of the brand diamond ring box. He didn't expect Shen Yue's eyes to be so sharp. Director Wang naturally can afford to buy a diamond ring, Hai Mingzhu said with some confusion. Men, being careless, buying a diamond ring without knowing what brand is common. That makes sense. Shen Yue looked at Wang Xinghai with a pale face and said, Director Wang doesn't know what diamond ring brand is normal, but Secretary Zhou has no reason not to know. When I saw Secretary Zhou come out in a panic just now, he also had one in his hand. But coincidentally, the diamond ring and the one in Director Wang's drawer were actually for couples. Hai Mingzhu finally understood, so it's like this. She didn't say it was okay, but when she said so, Wang Xinghai showed an expression that almost wanted to kill. However, he never erupted, just chuckled and didn't say anything anymore. He is a cunning person who knows how many words are wrong at the moment, so he pretends to be disdainful of defending himself. Shen Yue remained calm and said, when I saw this scene, I couldn't help but feel that your company is truly a multinational enterprise. Employees all adhere to the spirit of everyone for me, I for everyone. Even if a female secretary's salary is not high, she bought a Tiffany diamond ring and even bought one for her boss. By the way, what? Hai Mingzhu couldn't help but say. She is now convinced that Wang Xinghai must have had an affair with Secretary Zhou just now. By the way, some Tiffany perfume and lipstick are included. Shen Yue points to Wang Xinghai's right cheek. Wang Xinghai quickly wiped his right cheek with his palm, and his old face turned slightly red. He pretended to be calm and said, what nonsense are you talking about? I've been thinking about how Secretary Zhou put lipstick on Director Wang's face, Shen Yue said with a puzzled expression. This is actually quite simple, girl. Can you demonstrate it to Director Wang? Jin Xin said with great interest. Hai Mingzhu was taken aback, not realizing that she still had this obligation. Glancing at Wang Xinghai, who was bald, and then at Jin Xin, who was sitting in a chair waiting for her demonstration and even seemed to want to participate, Hai Mingzhu finally chose to walk toward Shen Yue. Shen Yue saw that Hai Mingzhu seemed to be about to come over and imitated the scene of Wang Xinghai and Secretary Zhou. He quickly reached out and stopped, saying, stop. Seeing the Hai Mingzhu stop, Shen Yue felt relieved and said, we don't need to repeat the specific plot. All I know is that Secretary Zhou is grateful to Director Wang for giving him a couple ring. Director Wang is grateful for Secretary Zhou's kindness, as the drawers are not properly pushed and he is in a hurry to accept Secretary Zhou's red-mouth gift. Jin Xin had a strange smile on his face, revealing an expression that only men could understand. Heimingzu's face seemed to turn slightly red, and she bit her lips without saying anything more. Wang Xinghai clenched his fist for a while and finally sat down slowly, saying word for word, "Are you threatening me?" Shen Yue was not intimidated by Wang Xinghai's aura, but simply smiled and said, "How dare we threaten Director Wang? Giant Industry is a legitimate business, and we are also a legitimate company. If there are formal procedures to follow, who likes to go off the beaten track? Director Wang, do you think so?" End of this chapter. Chapter 8. My requirements are very simple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. My requirements are very simple. When listening to Shen Yue say the words serious, Wang Xinghai only felt an indescribable irony. In this world, there are many things that are said to be serious, but there are not many things that are done to be serious. With a trembling hand, Wang Xinghai picked up the tea cup on the table and pretended to be calm, taking a sip of tea. He quickly thought of a solution, and by the time he put down the tea cup, his hand had already stabilized. "Do you believe that I am accusing you of slander when you slander my relationship with Secretary Zhou?" Wang Xinghai said calmly. Shen Yue noticed every slight change in Wang Xinghai's facial expression and denied, "You don't know." Wang Xinghai's eyelids twitched again unintentionally, but he had been sitting in the position of power for a long time, and his personality was inevitably suspicious, aloof, and naturally unwilling to give up like this. "Oh, are you so sure?" "I'm sure. If you had decided to sue us, you would have let the security guard in." Shen Yue always said calmly, "You are still trying to deny everything. Since you can remove the lipstick on your face, you can remove the perfume smell of the office. If necessary, you can even throw away the diamond ring and dismiss Secretary Zhou." Wang Xinghai's heart trembled, and he didn't expect Shen Yue to be like a worm in his stomach, thinking clearly about the next steps he wanted to take. "If you decide to erase these, we won't have much evidence left, and we have nothing to do with you. You can also throw our bid into the trash can. You can't swallow this breath." Shen Yue's tone was flat. Wang Xinghai not only had his eyelids twitching, but his heart couldn't help but jump faster. For so many years at Giant Industries, he feels like he eats more salt than too many people eat rice, and he treats many young people like he treats a wool child. Jiang is still old and spicy. He always believed in this, but when he faced Shen Yue, he realized that this guy was more like Jiang Jing. Not only was it spicy, but it was also choking. Choking almost made his whole body smoke, but he couldn't help but say that this person's analysis was extremely accurate. The bidding matter is irrelevant, but he is not willing to lose to two young men with a rough head. "But do you think that since we've put in a lot of effort, we'll have an uncertain battle?" Shen Yue pointed out a fact, "You must know that it's not easy to come to you without an appointment." Wang Xinghai snorted. Shen Yue looked at Jin Xin, who understood and immediately interjected, "Yeah, how dare we go up Liangshan without 3/3? Director Wang, since we dare to come here, of course we have made sufficient preparations." "Ready." Wang Xinghai weighed the weight of the word ready. "Yeah," Jin Xin said professionally, "Director Wang may not know about our Jintang company or the three of us, but we know Director Wang very well." Wang Xinghai said, "Oh," and narrowed his eyes. He was obviously still waiting to see Jin Xin's trump card. Just now, Director Wang said something was a bit problematic. Jin Xin saw Shen Yue retreat and knew it was time to play on his own. He and Shen Yue have always cooperated well, and their division of labor is very clear. If Shen Yue used a sharp awl to forcefully break a crack in a stiff situation, then Jin Xin was like an iron hammer and would continue to smash along the crack until the obstacle in front of him was cleared. Seeing Wang Xinghai silent, Jin Xin decided to break through his last line of defense with all his might. "You said your position was achieved through your hard work, but it's actually quite problematic, he said. Wang Xinghai's face turned even colder. The first lady to rise to power in the Li family is Lady Zun. Jin Xin finally showed his trump card. Mrs. Wang was very popular with the old lady back then. After a pause, Jin Xin smiled and said, "Who is the old lady?" Director Wang doesn't know, does he? Wang Xinghai's heart twitched, and he naturally knew that the old lady was Li Jian's wife. Whether in the past or now, the influence of the old lady on Li Jian was extremely significant. At present, Li Jie, who appears to be at the helm of Giant Industry, is actually still secretly manipulating the mysterious Li Jian. Back then, Director Wang didn't seem to be in high spirits and was a bit promiscuous. Because of these two hobbies, Director Wang was scolded several times by the old lady. It was only because Mrs. Wang was liked by the old lady and remembered the love between husband and wife that she finally said 2 more words for you. This gave Director Wang an opportunity, and he finally seized this opportunity. Jin Xin said with a clear victory in his hand, "Director Wang can erase all the evidence you have about Secretary Zhou, but if those photos of your intimate relationship with Secretary Zhou fall into the hands of Madame Zun, you know what the consequences will be." I think Director Wang will not be unaware of the consequences of women being ruthless. Suddenly standing up, Wang Xinghai's throat was a bit hoarse. "Are you stealing? Patting me?" Jin Xin smiled and said, "Have you forgotten that we are a security company? Not only can we ensure the safety of others, but our photography skills can also be comparable to wedding photography studios. If we want to go into the photography industry, I'm afraid we won't have anything to do with Wang Ju's wedding dress." He Mingzu nodded repeatedly, looking very fortunate to have switched companies ahead of schedule. It's not common to say these days. "I killed you, it's none of your business." Wang Ju's true love is too traditional. I would never have imagined that true love would be replaced by BL. Wang Xinghai sat back with a soft body, beads of sweat on his forehead, and said for a long time, "What are you really going to do?" Jin Xin smiled and said, "I think Director Wang has taken too many detours and seems to have forgotten how to follow the normal process. We are here to bid. Is it that simple?" Wang Xinghai looked up with some disbelief. "Of course it's just that simple." Jin Xin understood that the matter had been resolved and said lightly, "You can send the bidding documents according to the process. As long as we get the opportunity, everything we say between us will be treated as if nothing has happened." When walking out of the giant building, the scorching sun shone brightly, but Hai Mingzhu was shining brightly in her eyes, shining like a small star, constantly paying attention to Shen Yue and Jin Xin. Shen Yue remained indifferent as usual, seemingly ignoring even the gaze of others turning into flying knives and bullets. Jin Xin, however, was staring at Hai Mingzhu with some hair on his head and couldn't help but say, "You have to look at the road. What are you always watching us do? You used to be very capable people," Hai Mingzhu admired. Jin Xin just smiled, and the next sentence from Hai Mingzhu made him almost vomit blood. "I actually thought you were trying to pull me to spread the word. Are we just like those who do propaganda and sales?" "Very similar," Hai Mingzhu nodded and said seriously, "Mr. Jin, how was my performance just now?" "It can be considered a qualified vase," Jin Xin commented. Hai Mingzhu felt a bit aggrieved and said, "Isn't it that they just started working? They always need to familiarize themselves with the process." "Joined?" Jin Xin wondered, "Aren't we contract workers? We only signed a contract for 1 day, didn't you forget?" "I said Mr. Jin forgot about it," Hai Mingzhu said with her agile eyes. "You said that if I follow you in the future, I will broaden my horizons." The flatterer looked at Shen Yue again. "Following advisor Shen will broaden my horizons even more." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The company's business is a bit evil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The company's business is a bit evil. Seeing Shen Yue remain indifferent and not express her opinion, Hai Mingzhu felt that the person in charge of the company's affairs should be Jin Xin. She immediately changed the object of flattery and said, "Mr. Jin, you said that if you take on this order, the company will be very short of manpower. I want to come to your company and find you. As you said, being a man like a man, what you said can't be ignored." Jin Xin glanced at Shen Yue and shook his head, saying, "No way. Although we have a future, we don't have much strength. If you come to a company like this, it won't delay your future." He clearly remembers the past of being rejected by Hai Mingzhu. Some companies are promising and powerful, but you are too low. Key, and your strength is never revealed. I have eyes that don't know the great things, so please ask President Jin Haihan. Hai Mingzhu obviously has the ability to talk about the dead. Consultant Shen, what do you think? Jin Xin took a breath and looked at the girl who was quite talkative. He felt that the company lacked such a person, but he still highly valued Shen Yue's opinion. Consultant Shen. Hai Mingzhu looked at Shen Yue with a pleading voice, afraid of losing her job. Shen Yue just paid attention to the mirrors around him and casually said, "Giant Industries' business is a piece of fat, and it's not just us who are bidding. After bidding, there will be many companies competing, which will be a test at that time." What does Consultant Shen mean? Hai Mingzhu was a bit confused. What he meant was that you could stay for a few more days until we take on the business deal with Giant Industry. Jin Xin explained half and half as the lead, then you can intern for a month and see your work performance before making a decision. Okay, Hai Mingzhu smiled happily, seemingly not worried about her probation in a month. Jin Xin felt a bit strange. You don't ask about salary and benefits. Isn't it 800 yuan per day, 24,000 yuan per month? Hai Mingzhu said without hesitation. You're very good at math, Jin Xin sighed. My elementary school teacher also said the same. Hai Mingzhu was very happy to receive recognition. Jin Xin felt that she couldn't let this girl deviate and return to the essence of being a business person, saying, "But business doesn't count like that. Can single sales and bulk orders be priced at the same price?" Well, let's do it, 8,000 yuan per month. As long as you pass the internship period, I can increase your salary to your ideal price, which can also be considered. No problem, Hai Mingzhu agreed with one gulp, but it was easy to bargain. Jin Xin didn't expect this result, so he glanced at Hai Mingzhu again, as if wanting to say something, but finally held back. When Jin Xin finally got into the driver's seat, he said, "Aren't you planning to bid farewell to the cinema?" Hai Mingzhu, leaning against the back of her chair, paused and made a funny face, saying, "I really cheated on you guys." Jin Xin and Shen Yue were both stunned and asked in unison, "What did you deceive us about?" Hai Mingzhu showed a cunning expression and said, "Actually, I only came out to look for a job after graduating from college. When I saw a job advertisement at the cinema, I wanted to borrow it from your two potential clients." Before she could finish speaking, Jin Xin suddenly said, "If you really introduce Qingxing and have two of our clients, it's not possible for the studio not to invite you. Even if it doesn't happen, you have proven your work ability to the studio. No wonder you came with me so quickly. It turns out that you had already planned something. Bingo." Hai Mingzhu smiled happily, "Mr. Jin, am I smart?" Jin Xin muttered, "I just like your sense of humor." He glanced at Shen Yue in the mirror, and Shen Yue also looked at him through the mirror. The two nodded slightly, but Hai Mingzhu did not see this detail. The Mercedes-Benz stopped in front of the Jintang pot shop, and Hai Mingzhu followed Jin Xin and Shen Yue to the door. She asked, "Is this the address of our company?" Watching Jin Xin faint, Hai Mingzhu immediately said, "I'm teasing you. I know we're going to have a work meal, right? You don't need to remind us, we two big men won't let you pay," Jin Xin replied. The girl was seen through her thoughts and smiled awkwardly. However, sitting in the hotel seat, he was immediately revived with blood, fulfilling his duties as a secretary. Waiter, let's have a signature golden soup and beef pot, he said. Then he looked at Jin Xin and Shen Yue and said, CEO, consultant, are you drinking? Seeing Jin Xin and Shen Yue both shaking their heads, Hai Mingzhu simply said, another bucket of rice and 3 serving plates. These are for now. After dismissing the waiter, Hai Mingzhu lowered her voice and said, the amount of fat beef pot here is enough for 4 people to eat. We don't need to waste anything else. You've also applied here, haven't you? Jin Xin said with some suspicion. That's not true. Hai Mingzhu skillfully took out her phone and clicked on a software app. Here are introductions of local cuisine. I've been interested in this store for a long time, so I'm familiar with it. Actually, I've decided to work for a year and use the money to eat all kinds of delicious food around the world. Look, there are also spicy crayfish and gold medal roasted pig trotters nearby. Come on, come on. Jin Xin was afraid he was looking for a foodie. You don't need to introduce yourself, we know you have a great appetite. I have other skills. The 2 CEOs are watching me gradually show off. Hai Mingzhu smiled sarcastically, holding her phone and not taking it back. The contact information of the 2 CEOs. Jin Xin took the initiative to take Hai Mingzhu's phone, dialed a number, and then returned it to Hai Mingzhu. Hai Mingzhu glanced at the number and handed her phone to Shen Yue. Shen Yue didn't answer, and Jin Xin explained, just have my number. If you find me, you can find him. Consultant Shen is so mysterious, isn't he even given a number? Hai Mingzhu looked at Shen Yue with some curiosity and didn't insist. She took back her phone and said, Mr. Jin, I can be considered an employee of Jintang Company, right? Seeing Jin Xin nod, Hai Mingzhu immediately said, I've been holding on to a question for a long time and I've been wanting to say it. Today's salary will be paid to you, Jin Xin said immediately. It's not about today's salary. However, you can transfer it to me now. Hai Mingzhu wouldn't miss any opportunity. Jin Xin simply took out his phone, clicked twice, and a QR code appeared on the phone, just scan it. Hai Mingzhu was a bit cautious and also a bit strange. You gave me money, shouldn't you be scanning my QR code? You're not afraid that I'll cheat you out of money, are you? Jin Xin said with a smile on his face. That's definitely not possible. I definitely don't have a balance of 800 in my account. Although Hai Mingzhu said so, after scanning the code, she still confirmed that the amount she received was correct before putting down her phone. Seeing Jin Xin looking at her aggressively, the girl resolved her embarrassment and said, I really don't see this kind of payment method. What I want to ask is, are we a professional crime detection company? With excitement on her face, Hai Mingzhu added, is this group a professional gang for catching traitors? Shen Yue took a sip of tea and almost sprayed it on Hai Mingzhu's face. Jin Xin coughed incessantly and glanced at the waiter with a slightly strange expression nearby. He waved his hand and said, the dishes are here, so you don't have to wait by the side. After waiting for the waiter to leave, Jin Xin finally felt at ease and said, Pearl, you can eat whatever you want, you can't say anything casually. Seeing Hai Mingzhu casually picking up a chopstick of fat beef, Jin Xin felt that the dishes couldn't be eaten casually like the girl. He whispered, we're all our own people, and we don't have to hide it from you. In fact, we specialize in handling unclean things. The chopsticks in Hai Mingzhu's hand stopped and Jin Xin coughed, you don't understand, do you? The girl put down her chopsticks and said clearly, are we ghosts hunters? End of this chapter. Chapter 10. How dare this girl say? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. How dare this girl say? Jin Xin originally intended to explain to Hai Mingzhu. When this girl said the word, catching ghosts, her expression was as normal as if we were eating spicy hot pot today. It felt like these feudal superstitions were really deeply ingrained in people's hearts now. After thinking about it, she gave up on this plan. Shen Yue didn't say much and didn't eat much. Seeing Hai Mingzhu's calm expression, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you not afraid? What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of ghosts?" Hai Mingzhu not only looked fearless, but also excited. "I love watching horror movies the most. What kind of zombies, and vampires, and what kind of chainsaw maniacs? How fun it is." She chewed hard on the fat cow in her mouth, and a bit of spicy sauce flowed down the corner of her mouth, as if it was dripping with blood after eating human flesh. If combined with vocal lighting, it looks like this girl is not inferior to a horror movie. Although the waiter was far away, he still kept his ears propped up to listen to the scene of catching the traitor. Hearing this, he felt a change in art style and couldn't help but shiver. He was a bit far away from the three of them. "But we haven't really seen ghosts before. I never thought there would be such an opportunity in life." Hai Mingzhu said that ghosts can eat without delay, and finally got to the point after putting down her chopsticks. "Are you saying the Li family is haunted? Are we applying to catch ghosts?" "You can say that," Jin Xin said ambiguously. Hai Mingzhu gave Jin Xin a white glance and said, "Mr. Jin, I am finally an employee of the company. You can't let me play tricks and not tell me the truth, can you?" Jin Xin is responsible to the employees, Shen Yue suddenly interjected, "Don't worry, if our opponent is a ghost, we will definitely be the first to tell you." In the girl's heart, the weight of Shen Yue's words was clearly different from that of Jin Xin. Upon hearing Shen Yue say so, Hai Mingzhu put away her playful smile and carefully considered before answering, "So we're not sure if there's a ghost at the moment." Seeing Shen Yue and Jin Xin both nodding, Hai Mingzhu lowered her voice and said, "But you really know how to catch ghosts?" The two laughed but remained silent. After waiting for a long time without an answer, Hai Mingzhu couldn't help but hurriedly say, "Then I have to do something. Mr. Jin, you didn't hire me as an employee specifically for dinner, did you? There aren't many college graduates nowadays who are as proactive in their work as you are," Jin Xin praised. "That's right. Hai Mingzhu looks very enthusiastic about work. How about? I'll take care of those bed photos, fruit photos, and so on." Jin Xin almost took a sip of tea and suspected that this girl was not a serious child. Shen Yue shook his head and said, "There are no photos." "What?" Hai Mingzhu was taken aback. "That's our most precious trump card." "Why? Why is it just a pipe dream? Do you really want to see it?" Jin Xin said angrily and jokingly, "If there are such photos, they should be kept by me." "So what did you say?" Hai Mingzhu said with confusion on her face. "What did I say? I never said there was any fruit photo on my hand," Jin Xin shook his head and said. Upon careful consideration, Hai Mingzhu realized that this was really the case. From beginning to end, Director Wang believed that there were fruit photos in Jin Xion's hands, and Jin Xion only said that their company's photography skills were good. So there's no personal affair between Director Wang and Secretary Zhou either. Hai Mingzhu thought there was a problem as soon as she spoke. No, Director Wang must be guilty, otherwise he wouldn't behave like that. There is definitely a leg between the two of them, Jin Xion asked without a doubt. Why don't you take photos? Hai Mingzhu frowned. Jin Xion couldn't help but laugh and said, "Girl, we are a legitimate company and don't know how to use that kind of means. If you like it, you can go. Steal, take photos. Besides." After glancing at Shen Yue, Jin Xion continued, "The information we collected earlier was not detailed, and we only found out about Wang Xinghai and his secretary after seeing him. How to say it? Hai Mingzhu is not ashamed to ask more. Let consultant Shen talk to you." Jin Xion threw the pot at Shen Yue, feeling that not saying much for the first time was also a happy thing. Shen Yue saw the girl looking over, with a humble expression of seeking advice, and finally spoke up, when we ran into Secretary Zhou, she was breathing a bit urgently and her cheeks were a bit red. It was an effect caused by the secretion of adrenal cortex hormones. He glanced at the sea pearl and said, "Do you understand?" "I understand." Hai Mingzhu said quickly, "Adrenal cortex hormones include glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and a small amount of sex hormones." After a moment of pause, Hai Mingzhu added, "At that time, Secretary Zhou was secreting a third hormone, right?" Shen Yue and Jin Xin looked at each other with some surprise. Jin Xin couldn't help but laugh and said, "You girl really dares to say that. What dare we not say? They teach openly, can't we speak openly?" Hai Mingzhu said somewhat puzzled. "Who would teach these things?" Jin Xin curiously said, "You learned all these things in college." "Yeah," Hai Mingzhu said seriously. "What major are you studying?" Jin Xin asked in surprise, suspecting that this girl had returned from studying abroad in a volcanic country. "Psychology." Hai Mingzhu looked at Jin Xin with some surprise. Seeing Jin Xin feeling a bit embarrassed, Hai Mingzhu couldn't help but laugh and say, "Mr. Jin, it seems like you're really an antique. Where did you think of it? Psychology now teaches these physiological knowledge. Although it's not as clear as medicine, there's no reason why the human endocrine system shouldn't teach it." Jin Xin coughed repeatedly. Hai Mingzhu looked at Shen Yue with a sharp gaze and said, "Consultant Shen, are you also studying psychology?" "I don't know," Shen Yue shook her head. Hai Mingzhu was stunned for a moment. She looked lively, but in fact, she was extremely intelligent. Otherwise, she wouldn't have won the recognition of Jin Xin and Shen Yue so quickly. According to common sense, there are only two answers to her question. Yes and no, but Shen Yue's response clearly has a problem. What does it mean? I don't know. However, she hesitated for a moment and ultimately didn't ask further. She just said, "Consultant Shen looks more professional than me, who studies psychology. At least, I didn't see anything unusual about Secretary Zhou at that time. Of course he is more professional than you, otherwise I wouldn't have hired him," Jin Xin added. Shen Yue didn't have a smug expression and continued, "When Secretary Zhou turned around, I noticed that the hem of her shirt on the right waist was pleated a lot, obviously not tucked in properly. When I arrived at Wang Xinghai's room, I found that the angle of his office chair was a bit off, which was when I concluded that they had just." After pausing for a moment, Shen Yue saw that Hai Mingzhu was not embarrassed. He pondered his words and said, "They should have been intimate before they parted ways." Hai Mingzhu sighed in her heart. When Shen Yue connected the details she mentioned, she quickly understood the situation at the beginning. Wang Xinghai's room is rarely approached without reservation, which is why he is in the office of Hu Tianhu Emperor. When the three of them visited, Wang Xinghai and Secretary Zhou were clearly warming up. The deviation of the office chair position was naturally to make room for intimacy, and Wang Xinghai's dishonest hands made Secretary Zhou's clothes disheveled. Secretary Zhou hurriedly ran out without his previous professional demeanor, nor could he calm his internal physiological changes, which made Shen Yue see the loophole. It's easy to say now, but without full experience and a wise mind, how could these clues be seen through and replayed at that time, and then pry open the defense line of the old fox Wang Xinghai? End of this chapter.